The smell of coal smoke and hot metal is the first thing I remember. Not the scent of my mother, not the sound of her voice. She died bringing me into this world, leaving me with a father, Roric Runecarver, and the echoing emptiness of our forge. It wasn't just a smell, though. It was a presence. The heat would wrap around me like a heavy blanket, prickling my skin even in the depths of winter. The bellows wheezed like an old dwarf with a chest cold, a rhythmic whoosh that punctuated the clang of hammer on steel. And the metal itself. Each type had its own scent, its own feel. The sharp, almost acrid tang of iron, the smoother, sweeter smell of copper, the heavy, earthy aroma of bronze. When it was just me and Father, the forge felt comfortable, a familiar cocoon. But when other dwarves were around, placing orders or picking up repairs, the air would thicken with their expectations, their judgments. It felt like the walls themselves were closing in. He wasn't a bad father, not cruel or neglectful, just settled, content, a word that always felt like a rusty shackle around my ankle. He was a smith, competent enough. He made horseshoes, repaired plows, and occasionally crafted a sturdy axe head for the miners. He could shape metal, but he couldn't breathe into it. He couldn't make it sing the way our ancestors supposedly did, the way I wanted to. Our clan, the Runecarvers, had a storied past, or so the tales went. Generations ago, they were masters of their craft, forging weapons and artifacts of legendary power. The heart of that legend was Stonebreaker, a runesmithing hammer passed down through the ages, a hammer that, according to the stories, could cleave mountains and imbue metal with magic. My grandfather, they said, wielded Stonebreaker with unmatched skill, until the goblins came. I never knew him. He died defending our forge, Stonebreaker in hand, when the green tide swept through our settlement. My father, Roric, wasn't there. He was apprenticing in a neighboring town, spared the carnage but forever marked by the loss. He returned to find his father dead, his home in ruins, and the hammer gone. He never spoke much about it, but I saw it in his eyes, the resignation, the acceptance of a diminished legacy. He rebuilt the forge, raised me as best he could, and taught me the basics of smithing. But the fire, the spark of true runesmithing, was missing. I, on the other hand, burned with it. I devoured the old family scrolls, tracing the intricate patterns of the runes with calloused fingers. I spent hours in the forge, even as a child, building a miniature version from scraps and clay, mimicking my father's movements with a tiny hammer and bellows. My first real success came when I was barely a teenager. I crafted a lock, a small, intricate thing that could only be opened with a specially crafted runed key. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I hadn't just followed instructions. I'd created something new, something unique. My father had smiled, a genuine, proud smile, and for a moment I thought he saw it too, the fire that burned within me. He kept that lock. I didn't realize it at the time, but that small piece of work meant something to him. But the forge could also be a cruel teacher. There was a time I tried to rush a repair on some mining pulleys, thought I was too good for such mundane work. The pulleys failed, causing a cave-in. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt, but the damage was done. Not just to the mine, but to my father's reputation. He took the blame, of course. He always did. That taught me a lesson, or should have, about recklessness. And it planted the first seed of doubt. Was I truly good enough, or just a pretender, destined to repeat the mistakes of the past? And then there was the mine. The old, abandoned one, just outside of town. My cousin Dagna dared me to go in. We were just kids, exploring, playing at being adventurers. I stepped on a rotten board, and the world dropped out from under me. I fell, down into the darkness. I landed hard, the air knocked out of me. I was trapped, surrounded by rock and earth, the silence pressing in on me like a physical weight. I screamed, I cried, I clawed at the walls, but it was no use. It felt like hours, days, an eternity in the cold, dark silence. I don't remember much, just the overwhelming terror, the feeling of being utterly alone, utterly helpless. The damp air clung to my skin, thick and heavy, and the smell of wet earth and stone filled my nostrils, choking me. Every tiny sound, a drip of water, a scuttling insect, echoed in the vast emptiness, amplifying my fear. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears, a frantic drum against the suffocating silence. Then I heard his voice. My father's. He found me, pulled me out, carried me back into the light. I clung to him, shaking, unable to speak. I never told him how truly terrified I was. I never told anyone. That fear, that claustrophobia, it became a part of me, a secret shame hidden beneath a veneer of bravado, a dwarf afraid of the dark, afraid of enclosed spaces. It was pathetic. As I grew older, the gap between my father and me widened. He was content with his simple life, his simple smithing. I craved more. I wanted to master the runes, to create things of beauty and power, to reclaim the lost glory of our family. The stories of Stonebreaker filled my dreams. I imagined myself wielding it, forging artifacts that would make the old tales pale in comparison. But even in those dreams, a whisper of doubt lingered. Could I truly live up to the legend? Was I strong enough, skilled enough, worthy enough? But my father, he didn't believe in those tales anymore. He'd held the hammer, he told me once, years ago. He'd felt its weight, its age, but not its power. "It's just a hammer, Torvina," he'd said, his voice weary. "A symbol, nothing more." His words stung, but they also fueled my determination. I would prove him wrong. I would find Stonebreaker, and I would unlock its secrets. I would show him and myself that I was more than just a reckless girl with foolish dreams. The final push came, as these things often do, with violence. Bandits, not goblins this time, but just as ruthless. They raided our town, targeting the forge, hoping for easy loot. It wasn't a large raid, maybe 5 bandits in total, but they were armed and looked desperate. My father stood his ground, telling me to stay back, to hide. He was brave, but he was no warrior. He was wounded, a blow to the head that sent him sprawling. The bandit, a scarred brute with a rusty axe, stood over him, ready to deliver the final blow. And something inside me snapped. I grabbed the heaviest hammer I could find, a plain, workaday thing, and charged. I roared, a sound born of fear and fury, and I swung. The hammer connected with the bandit's arm with a sickening crunch. He howled in pain, dropping his axe. I didn't hesitate. I swung again and again, driving him back, away from my father. The other bandits, startled by my sudden ferocity, hesitated. They had expected easy pickings, not a crazed dwarf defending her home with the fury of a cornered bear. I drove them back, those bandits, back into the street where the town guard finally rallied. We fought them side by side, a chaotic melee of steel and blood. The clash of metal rang in my ears, mingled with the shouts of the guards and the screams of the wounded. The smell of blood, coppery and sharp, filled the air. It was a blur of motion, of desperate parries and furious blows. I moved on instinct, fueled by adrenaline and a primal need to protect my father, my home. They were driven off, some killed, others captured. I stood there panting, my hands trembling, the hammer slick with sweat and blood, and I knew. I had faced danger, and I had prevailed, but the victory felt hollow. Was this all I was capable of? Protecting what was instead of creating what could be? Was this my peak? To fight for scraps? To defend a life I didn't even want? The thought chilled me more than the lingering fear of the bandits. I couldn't stay. I couldn't live this life, this quiet, predictable existence. I needed to find Stonebreaker. I needed to prove myself, to my father, to my clan, to myself. I needed to see if the legends were true, if I could be more than just a reflection of my father's competence. The next few days were a blur of preparations. I gathered my tools, my runescribing kit, my meager savings. I pored over old maps, searching for any clue, any hint of the goblins who had stolen our legacy. I spoke to the elders, those who remembered the raid, gleaning scraps of information about the goblin tribe, their markings, their possible territory. Each piece of information I gathered felt like a weight added to my pack, a reminder of the immense task ahead. What if I failed? What if I found the hammer, and it was just a hammer, like Father said? What if I wasn't strong enough to even lift it, let alone wield its power? These questions circled in my mind, a constant hum of anxiety beneath the surface of my determination, but the thought of staying, of settling for a life half-lived, was even more terrifying. My father watched me. His expression was a mixture of sadness and pride. He knew I was leaving, and he knew he couldn't stop me. He'd seen the fire in my eyes, the same fire he'd probably seen in his own reflection when he was young, before the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. "Father," I said one evening as we sat by the forge, "do you ever miss it?" He knew what I meant. He always did. He looked at the hammer he was holding, a simple, unadorned thing used for shaping horseshoes. "Miss what, Torvina?" "The runes," I said. The power, the stories, the chance to be more than just a smith." He sighed, a sound like air leaking from a worn bellows. "Stories are just stories, lass. They grow taller with each telling. The hammer was a fine piece of work, no doubt, but it was just a tool." "But grandfather—" "Your grandfather was a brave man and a skilled smith," he interrupted, his voice firm. "But he was not a god, and the hammer did not save him, did it?" I flinched. "No," I answered. He looked at me, and the lines that have been growing in the corners of his eyes seemed to soften. "But that does not mean there is no magic in smithing. Look at your lock." The morning I left, it was just him and a few of my cousins at the edge of town. The air was crisp and cold, the sky a pale, washed-out gray. My cousins, Dagna, Boren, and little Helga, offered awkward words of encouragement, their eyes wide with a mixture of envy and concern. Dagna, the one who dared me into the mine all those years ago, punched me lightly on the arm. "Don't fall in any holes this time, eh, Torvina?" she said, trying for a joke, but I saw the worry in her eyes. My father stepped forward. He held out a small, leather-bound book. It was a journal, blank pages waiting to be filled, and on its clasp was a lock. My lock. The first runed lock I had ever created. "For your journey," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For your runes. For your story." I took the journal, my fingers tracing the familiar lines of the lock. I met his gaze, and for a moment I saw not resignation, but hope. And in that hope, I saw a challenge to live up to the potential he saw in me, even if I doubted it myself. A challenge to become the runecarver he could have been, but never dared to try. "I'll find it, Father," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. "I'll find Stonebreaker, and I'll make you proud. I'll prove I am strong enough." He nodded, a single slow movement of his head. He didn't say anything, but his eyes said it all. He was letting me go, not just physically, but emotionally. He was giving me his blessing, his trust, and the burden of our family's legacy. I turned and walked away, the weight of the journal in my pack, the weight of my family's legacy on my shoulders. The road ahead was long and uncertain, filled with dangers I couldn't even imagine. Goblins, wild beasts, treacherous terrain, and the ever-present fear of failure. They all loomed before me, a daunting gauntlet. But I had to try. I had to see if the legends were true, if I was capable of more than just surviving. But I was Torvina Runecarver, and I was ready. I had a hammer, a journal, and a burning need to prove myself. The fear was still there, lurking in the shadows of my mind. The fear of enclosed spaces, the gnawing fear of failure, the the constant whisper that I wasn't strong enough, that I wasn't worthy of the Runecarver name. But this time, I am using that fear. The fear that I will never know what my potential held. I can feel it pushing me, driving me to take this first step, to search for my own legend, to finally determine if that potential inside is real or just my imagination. And as I walked, I knew that even if I failed, even if I never found Stonebreaker, I would have at least tried. And that, in itself, was a victory of sorts.